I'm looking at something, and I'm not sure what it is. It's about 18 inches tall and maybe 10 inches across. It's hidden behind some grass and brush, and shaded by the looming timbers overhead. It's round and rusted, with a big hole in its side. The top has a lid rusted in place, and there's a handle. I assume it's been painted at one time, and that it told us what it was. It's been used for target practice, as I can see several large caliber bullet holes in it. There's another hole in the top, with rusted edges of metal sticking up that used to be a spout. I think it's an old galvanized gas can. I tried to pick it up, but it was buried partway into the ground. It's been here a long time. If it could talk, what would it say? Would it talk of all the thunderstorms it sat through on hot and humid July nights? Or the times it was buried over its top in snow during a January blizzard? I wonder how many cars it has heard passing on the nearby road, or the number of animals and people that have casually walked past it without noticing it. But what struck me the most about this solitary rusted can is while it can no longer hold gasoline, it does yet hold the truth. It was here, in the ravine, the night that someone put Tammy here. This is the Footsteps in the Dark podcast, Season 1, Episode 2, Homecoming Night. And I'm your host, Chad Zimmerman. This podcast contains themes and language intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. If you want to see the pursuit for truth in Tammy's case continue, please consider supporting us. You can do this in a number of different ways. First, you can join our Patreon site. This is where you'll find all of the in-depth analysis that went into our conclusions and lots of behind-the-scenes information. You can support us by buying merchandise, or you can donate. All of these options can be found on our website at footstepsinthedarkpodcast.com. And if you like the song by John Slap Myers, Tammy's Ghost, that we use at the end of each episode as a prelude to the next, please download it. It's just 99 cents and you can find it on iTunes. And as always, we thank you for your support. It really does mean everything to us. Over the past several months, I've been able to obtain over 2,000 pages of records pertaining to this case. They include autopsy reports, trial transcripts, and hundreds of pages of case files that involve dozens of interviews. This episode takes us from March of 1992 until shortly after the discovery of Tammy's body. Many of the details in this episode were obtained directly from these records. There may be certain events or gaps in time that are intentionally left out that may be discussed later, as they are details that did not come forth until after Tammy's death. When we left off from the previous episode, it was February of 1992. Tammy was in Lincoln for her freshman year at the University of Nebraska with the intent of pursuing an advertising degree. She had been dating Rob since the first semester, but a phone call from her ex-boyfriend, Eric Stukel, in January of 1992 would reinvigorate her thoughts and emotions about him. This would prompt Eric to decide to take a trip over spring break to Lincoln to see Tammy in March, something her boyfriend Rob was seemingly unaware of as they spent his birthday together on March 20th. In the letters I've seen that Tammy had written during her second semester in Lincoln, she typically talks about Rob and some of the things they've done, such as going to a ballet or double dating with another couple, and going out partying, the typical kinds of things that college kids and college couples do. She digresses about Eric and what to do, and tells herself that she just needs to forget him, but can't. Yet one thing is missing from her letters, which is any significant mention about school. And Tammy was struggling with classes and her grades, which would eventually cause her to put college on hold and try to figure out what she wanted to do with her life and where. As a result, she moved back to Yankton at the end of the second semester, which took her away from Rob and put her back home close to Eric. The summer for Tammy would consist of trying to find steady work and keeping up her social schedule, but she found herself being constrained by the house rules that included an early curfew. Being 19 and an adult, Tammy found herself unwilling to adhere to her mother's rules, and she spent much of the summer living in different homes for short periods of time. For a couple of weeks in August, she stayed at her close friend Travis's house, and although her relationship was strictly platonic, it could be perceived as inappropriate, and she moved out. And while she was trying to find her footing, she was still caught between one boy who seemed to have a positive future, Rob, and Eric, who seemed to have little to offer, something Tammy would discuss with some of her friends. And one of those friends was Marjo.
In stuff that she had written to me that, and I can share that with you as long as you don't make it public, because I mean it's my personal stuff from Tammy.
Yeah.
But where she kind of goes through saying, you know, I just can't get away from him. You know, yeah. She was kind of stuck between Rob and then Stukel.
And here's Tammy's mother, Nancy.
Whomever she would go out with, or even, you know, just talk about, or they were all good guys, all good close girl friends, except for Eric. He was the only, and he, you know, just and wouldn't leave her alone. Even when she would try to break up with him, he was the only one that was, I guess, what I want to say, the weird, almost like the boys are saying, you know, he was just like all of the other guy friends, or even what she dated, were all good people. But he was just out of the norm.
As part of my conversation with Tammy's mother, Nancy, I asked her if there were any specific memories she had regarding Eric that stood out and played into her perceptions about who he was before everything else happened.
Oh, okay, yes. And I can't remember if I came home or if I was just home. And he came over, and it was during the school year, and that would have been that summer, before she died, and they were in the backyard, each a lawn chair, and then it had hit me, well, he should be in school, and so I went out the back door, and I said, Eric, shouldn't you be in school? And oh my gosh, whatever the words, that I have forgotten the words probably because they were so bad, he got so angry because I would say that shouldn't he be in school? And so that I came back in the house, and I can't remember specifically now. I know I'm thinking I called the school to verify that shouldn't he be, you know, and I can't remember if I called his mom. That's what I wish I could remember, if I had called his mom, but I can't remember if I did. But that reaction from him was bad.
For some of Tammy's close friends, they could see that her moving back to Yankton was a risky proposition that ran the risk of Tammy falling into the wrong crowd, most notably Eric's. From much of what I've seen, Tammy's life was slowly spiraling and becoming more unstable as she started dating Eric again, while trying to maintain a double life by maintaining a relationship with Rob. She was on the outs with her mother, bouncing between homes and jobs, and distracting herself from the woes of adulthood by partying. These things did not go unnoticed by some of her closest friends, as they tried their best to instill positive advice upon her. Here's Marjo again.
Because I was out in Jackson, Wyoming working, and when I came back, Tammy and I had gotten together, and as far as I knew, she was going to break up with him, because we just had this really long conversation. She felt bad about the fact that her and her mom weren't getting along, and it just kind of sounded like she was just kind of, in a way, lost as far as, what she wanted to do. And we just kind of talked, and I said, well, make things right with your mom and get back to your house and, be with your brothers and stuff like that. And
in the next section of this episode, we're going to be discussing Tammy's activities and plans during late August and early September of 1992. She had a lot going on during this time in her personal life, and you'll want to listen closely. Otherwise, it may seem very confusing. What we're going to discuss is based upon timeline reconstructions from letters Tammy had written, as well as interviews of her friends taken after she disappeared. By mid-August, Tammy's romantic life had become strained. According to a letter dated August 31st, written to one of her closest friends, she had broken up with Rob because she was with Eric all of the time and Rob had called her selfish. Yet she also mentions in this letter that she had broken up with Eric a couple of weeks before the letter was written, and that Eric was now seeing a different girl that worked at Little Caesars who was a few years older. Thus, by mid-August, Tammy was single. However, a concert would nudge her in a different direction, if only for a fleeting moment. On August 28, 1992, Tammy went to Lollapalooza at Harriet's Island in the Twin Cities with 3 boys, Paul, Brad, and Sean Coles. And she'd catch the attention of Sean. In the letter, she mentions how Sean was sweet on her, put her up on his shoulders, held her hand, kissed her, and they curled up on a couch with his arm around her, but nothing more than that. It's during this time frame, late August and early September, that Tammy's dating life would become even more erratic and confusing, and Tammy would find herself playing with other people's hearts, leading to a speculation of a lover's triangle being implicit in her death. In early September, Rob would drive from Lincoln to Yankton and bring Tammy back to Lincoln, and she stayed with him for a few days before returning, bumming a ride back with a friend of Rob's heading back to Vermilion. Based upon the records, it appears the fence was mended and Rob felt the relationship was back on track. However, the very next day after returning, on September 5th, Tammy would end up spending the night and sleeping with Sean Coles. What happened in those few days she was in Lincoln, and were things going well, or had they fallen apart? I discovered a report from a person that witnessed Rob and Tammy during that time frame, as well as Rob's actions and statements following her death. I had been in contact with this person for some time, and we finally agreed to talk. This is Shelley Siebel. She was a receptionist, and Rob worked for a private courier, and they got to know each other a little bit.
For her, and he was waiting for the mail to come downstairs because he would sit on the couch and he'd run his hands through his hair. He goes, I don't even know if I'm with her. So I just, he was just so distraught about his girlfriend. And he would just, like, how you run your hands through your hair, you're like, kind of like, I don't know what I'm going to do with her. I said, well, if you guys don't get along, I said, just break up. What's the big deal? And he goes, well, what am I going to do with her? I don't know what I'm going to do with her. It's like, I don't even know what's going on. She was riding in his Jeep, and they picked up the mail together. She used the bathroom, she took some candy out of the jar, and that's when I met her. I said, yeah, free candy, I don't care. And that's when I saw her. And he told me they're going back to her hometown for the weekend. That's what he told me. And that's what she was agreeing to. You told me that she has another boyfriend or something, right?
Yeah.
The week prior to her me meeting her ever, that was the first time I met her, he was so distraught. And he just he was like frustrated. He was angry. He was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with her, and it's like, hey, calm down, just let's break up. I never thought about, any of that stuff, like she's going to die or something. But it's just the way I thought he was a nice kid. But after he was doing all that and saying, like, I don't know what I'm going to do with her. And it's like, man, you aren't crazy. And I never thought anything more about it. I thought he was crazy. Just a crazy kid, you know.
Clearly, Rob had been frustrated with Tammy and didn't know what to do. Fortunately, I was able to locate Rob's interviews with law enforcement. In these reports, Rob tells investigators that Tammy was planning on moving to Lincoln in a couple of weeks to get away from Yankton. However, in the letter dated August 31st, just a few days before Rob picked her up, Tammy wrote that she was planning on moving to California with a different friend from college, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, well, shortly after I met her, I decided that summer after school, a friend and I decided to move to Los Angeles. And that was something that she kind of talked about. It was kind of a mutual thing. I think, if I remember correctly, she had an idea that she wanted to do that also. And it just turned out that I also did. You know what I mean? And so I actually, that's where I was when she went missing. I was in Los Angeles, and the assumption was she was actually going to come out there and either visit or try to stay with us, because me and my friend actually moved out there for almost a year.
But the California plans fall apart, and she writes that she's no longer moving there because there aren't any jobs and living expenses are high. Clearly, Tammy was thinking about getting out of Yankton. But where was she really intending to go? This question has never fully been answered, and it brings up another important point. If she was going to move, what were her plans with Eric?
I had to go back to school for sorority stuff, so I had to go back early, and I had said to her, I said, you need to just get away from Stukel and just, I think we were 19. I was like, come up to Vermilion, with Travis, come to a college party and, just kind of get away from that high school scene. So the night it actually happened, that's what she was supposed to do. She was supposed to meet Travis and come with Travis to Vermilion and be in Vermilion with Travis and I for this Delta party that we were going to. And she never showed up.
On September 11th, Tammy moves in with her Aunt Vicky and her boyfriend, Mike Cruz, just a few blocks east of the Pump and Stuff gas station. This will become more important later in the podcast. On Saturday, September 12th, Tammy goes to a party at her friend Kelly's house and with her friend Travis, but ends up leaving with Eric. And the next day, September 13th, Eric and Tammy are back together, going for a walk near a popular spot near Gavin's Point Dam called The Lookout, and taking her to see the movie Far and Away later that day. It's in this letter that Tammy mentions a shift in her behavior, that although she's been on a 30-day bender, both her and Eric have been sober for 3 days. The date of the last letter is September 17th, 1992, the day Tammy went missing. Based upon the letter, Tammy and Eric had gone on walks 2 of the 3 previous evenings and had a date set up for the following Friday, September 18th, at the Black Steer, and Eric was paying. In the letter she states, "I'm very happy." This brings us to the most important date of the case, September 17th, 1992. Based upon the records, Tammy meets with her mother in the morning and they go to JCPenney to buy her some luggage that had been previously promised as a graduation gift.
Well, that's what I mean. Well, who would think that would happened, and that was why in my mind, and I wanted, of course, to be in my mind because that day, that Thursday, had gone to JCPenney's and got her this luggage. That in my mind, that she just went wherever for the weekend. Yeah.
And again, this supports the idea that Tammy was planning on going somewhere. Later in the afternoon, she applies for a job at a bank, withdraws $25 in cash, and at 4:45 stops by the Safari Club bar and talks to Sean Coles for a few minutes before being asked to leave because she was underage. Around 5:30 p.m., Eric Stukel arrives to pick her up for dinner, and this is verified by her Aunt Vicky. They head to Pizza Hut, where they both have spaghetti and meatball dinners with Mountain Dew at table E2, and the receipt is time-stamped at 6:35 p.m. They left and went back to Eric's and watched TV, and then left around 8:45 to head to the homecoming coronation activities, where they are seen by several witnesses. One witness even remembered what Tammy was wearing: a button-down denim shirt, tan pants, brown penny loafers, and a black purse, and specifically mentioned she was not wearing socks out of protest to her mother. Afterwards, they met up with several other kids at a location near the airport known as the Dead End Road. This is just off a road that locals refer to as Airport Road, and it is north of the airport. It's a spot where the road ends at a T intersection, but there's a lane that goes straight over a hill and down into an area that's shielded from view, and is a great location for kids to meet up and party. Today, there's a locked gate across the road that prevents anyone from entering. It's here that they would learn that Dan Stevenson was going to have a party several miles away across the river into rural Nebraska, at a vacant farmstead owned by the Stevenson family. Eric and Tammy would leave and head to the Cork and Bottle, where Tammy would try to purchase alcohol but was refused for being underage. They head to the Pump and Stuff gas station just before the Meridian Bridge and purchased 2 six-packs of beer and a pack of cigarettes, then drove across the bridge to the Stevenson farmstead. At around 6 miles from Yankton, the vacant farmstead was an out-of-the-way location where kids could party without worry of local law enforcement and parental supervision. For 30 years, rumors have swirled around what happened at that party. However, dozens of early reports were discovered at the Nebraska State Patrol long-term storage facility in Lincoln, Nebraska. Since most of the kids that attended drove with passengers, and since most of the kids in attendance were interviewed by law enforcement, cross-referencing the information in the reports allows us to develop a timeline and a clearer picture as to what transpired that night at the party. The farmhouse is located just over a mile from Highway 121 as the highway rounds and descends along the southern edge of the Crofton Lakeview Golf Course. The house is a typical Midwestern farmhouse with a screened-in front porch with a short slanted roof that goes up and ends just below 2 windows upstairs and a high-pitched roof above the windows. It's painted a light yellow color, and the house is surrounded by sparsely populated trees. But when the trees are full of leaves, it creates a heavily shaded landscape where kids can be out and about the property and maintain a sense of privacy. It sits on the corner of 2 gravel roads and is relatively close to the road, close enough to park on the road and walk to the front or the back of the house. There's a gravel lane that enters to the south of the farmstead from the east, and another that enters from the north and leads to the equipment sheds and back of the house. Between 8:45 and 9 p.m., Dan Stevenson arrives with 3 passengers. From this point forward, several more cars would arrive and a few would depart. Dan unlocks the house and other teenagers start socializing inside and outside of the house. Being a mid-September day, the temperature approached 73 degrees with an overnight low around 50. One attendee, Christy, took pictures and I was able to obtain copies. Though most fall short of professional pictures, they are the only pictorial evidence of the party that night. One picture was taken inside the main floor living room. It shows a wood-paneled room with a white ceiling. There's ductwork that comes out of the ceiling that snakes along one side of the room. 7 kids can be seen dancing and having a good time. One kid is wearing a disastrous white long-sleeve shirt covered with random black geometric shapes and lines with splotches of teal, yellow, and purplish red, and he's holding a cigarette up in the air, while a girl behind him is holding her Budweiser High as she dances. Based upon the reconstruction of the reports, Melissa Tucker left the party before 10 p.m. and passed Tammy and Eric near the Yankton Resort heading towards the party. One of Tammy's close friends, Katie Larson, arrives driving her black Mustang with 2 of her other friends just before 10 p.m. Tammy and Eric would arrive within a few minutes, witnessed by another large group of kids that were leaving at around 10 p.m. While few commented on their demeanor when they arrived, it was noted by one of Tammy's friends, Erica, and she noticed something that seemed off about them.
I can't remember what time Ryan and I got there, but I mean, if you knew somebody, and they were home that weekend, they were there. I mean, Stevenson Farm, Danny would have parties out there before. I mean, it's not like, we didn't go party there. I mean, recently we started going out there to party, but, it was just every kid having a good time. It's a rick-a-rah. It's homecoming. It's, let's have a good time. We're going to get drunk. We're going to smoke some pot. We're going to go be rebels and go home late and get shit-faced. And, drive our cars drunk. I mean, that's how it was, Everybody was in great spirits. And, when we left, it was just kind of one of those days, it's like, okay, well, I'm done. I want to go home. It's fun, but it's not for me at that time. And I'm glad Ryan was ready to go. It was just like, okay, let's get out of here. This is just getting to be that time and everything else. And, I was walking down that gravel road and when those two showed up, and in passing, hey guys, hey Tammy, hey Eric, how are you? But I mean, it was just like, she was not being herself. She was not her bubbly self. You could tell like something was on her mind. And so I thought, well, maybe it's true. Maybe she's going to dump him tonight. And that is what I kind of thought, because here, Yankton has a terrible rumor mill. The rumors fly. I've heard so many damn rumors that, she was engaged and she was coming home. This guy had proposed to her in Lincoln, and nobody, I mean, I didn't know him. I know her real friends probably knew him, but you hear, he gave her a ring. He wants to marry her and she needs to get rid of Eric. And so, oh God, Eric's going to be just heartbroken because that's the love of his life is Tammy, and so I don't know if they, who knows, maybe they had already, maybe she said something to him before they got to the party, fighting about it. I don't know. But, going back and thinking about that and knowing that was probably why she's coming home is to dump him. Did it trigger him to do stupid? Did it trigger anger with somebody that's infatuated with a person? Absolutely could. I mean, my God. I mean, I think Eric, honest to God, thought that they were going to be happily ever after forever and ever and ever. And it changed when she went to college. I mean, she got out of Yankton, and Tammy's eyes were always wide. She kind of, she was a free spirit, and I can't see her, it's like her brother Mark. Where is he? Washington, I believe. And, why stick around here? So she got her feet wet going down to Lincoln, which isn't far. I mean, maybe she just figured, all right, I'm done. He's still in high school. I'm in college. I'm going to go be wild and figure my life out. And I don't want him with me. And so, but yeah, I mean, passing them, I thought about it. It's like, oh God, I wonder if she just dumped him. Is that what's going on here? I mean, those thoughts go through your brain. And then you start analyzing everything after the fact. And like I say, Yankton is the empire of rumor mill. And so everybody's yippee-yapping and getting their opinions in there about what they think happened. But, I don't know. Definitely uncomfortable when we passed them. It was uncomfortable. It was cold, unfriendly, pissy, just when couples fight, when you feel uncomfortable around somebody when they just had a fight, that's what that felt like. Like, oh God, maybe we should go. You know what I mean?
Eric is carrying a 6-pack of Moosehead beer, and Tammy has a 6-pack of Bud Light. She leads the way as they walk into the house from the rear, and Erica remembers they did not appear to be getting along very well. It's at the back of the house that they run into a few older boys. One of them, Aaron London, had parked his car and hooked up speakers on the porch so they could listen to their music. One guest, Chad Schramm, also noticed that Tammy wasn't smiling and looked upset. Several attendees reported seeing Eric and Tammy in the front living room, often referred to as the stereo room where kids would dance and listen to music. During this time, one person notes that Eric is wearing a strange jacket, and this stood out to him because the room was hot from all the people in it that were dancing. According to Eric's interviews, they left that room after just a few minutes because he was irritated and went into the kitchen. And this is where Tammy was noticed by numerous kids. It's here that Aaron London, who had just finished putting his car speakers on the porch, sees Eric, and Eric asks him to play music by the band Ministry, but Aaron doesn't. And about 15 minutes later, Eric goes out to his car with him and looks through his music collection to find something to play. Meanwhile, Jason Foss, who Tammy had gone on a couple of dates with during the summer, reminisced with Tammy about the dates and generalities like water skiing and the coronation earlier that night. He estimated that they talked for about half an hour during that time. And during that time, Tammy drank 2 Bud Lights. Adjacent to the kitchen is another room that is often referred to as the dark room. Several teenagers remembered seeing Tammy in that room, at times with Eric and at times with her friends Katie and Dee Dee. By most accounts, Tammy spent much of the night in the dark room or the kitchen having conversations with friends. And the conversation consisted of mostly what they'd been doing, who they had dated, and what their future plans might be. Pretty normal conversation. Around 11 p.m., Eric goes upstairs to one of the bedrooms with Kevin Bender to smoke marijuana. And they're interrupted by 2 girls, Robin and Chriselle, who decided to take a tour of the farmhouse. Around this time, Tammy is out on the back porch with her friend Dee Dee, possibly having a cigarette, and then they go to pee in the bushes.
Well, so the worst memory that I have is that night, because I'm sure you read we went to the bathroom behind that thing, and I had to get going. And she said she had so much to tell me. And I said, well, let's just wait when we can sit down and, we're going out on Saturday. We'll do it then. And I wish. And I know that it had something to do with Eric. I know that it had something to her maybe breaking up with him because she was saying she was thinking about doing it. And I said, so I mean, because I never thought anything would ever going to become serious of this. But obviously, maybe he did, obviously, or he didn't take it well, or maybe she broke up with him that night. I don't know. And that's my worst memory, because I remember her hair. I remember her staring at me about 4 inches apart as we're both squatting and peeing together, and her telling me how much she wants to tell, has so much to tell me, and I'll never know until I'm with her someday again.
It's at this time, around 11 p.m., that Dan Stevenson announces that the party's over and it's time to gather things and go home. It's a school night, and most of the teenagers need to get home so they can get some sleep before school in the morning. Between 11:05 and 11:15, Eric comes back downstairs after taking a couple of hits of marijuana. By some reports, he gives Tammy a big kiss, and by others he comes out and says, "Let's go." It's between 11 p.m. and 11:30 that the remainder of the kids at the party start rounding up their friends and head to their cars. From 11 p.m. onward, approximately 44 young adults begin getting ready to leave by exiting the house, milling around the farmyard, and walking to their cars. By the time Eric and Tammy leave, around 11:15 to 11:20, there are still about 15 people scattered about the farmhouse property. Although nobody actually reports seeing Eric and Tammy leave, 2 prior attendees returned to the party after dropping people off in Yankton, and one person, Dustin DeLozier, went to the farmhouse between 11 and 11:30, and everyone was gone. Chad Schramm had taken a few kids back to Yankton and then came back to the party and just missed Christy Thunker, Aaron London, and Jamie Poppy. He went back to Aaron London's place, arriving around midnight, and London had just gotten ready for bed, telling Schramm they'd left about 10 to 15 minutes after Schramm had left the first time. Reports indicate that when Dan Stevenson left around 11:30, just one black car remained, and Eric drove a silver '88 Beretta. By most accounts, everybody had left between 11:30 and midnight. For everyone else except Eric, this would be the last time anyone would see Tammy alive. And what happened after the party becomes murky. According to Eric's early interviews about their activities that night, they left and headed back to Yankton, where they saw a familiar vehicle parked at the Cork and Bottle gas station and liquor store. They went in and bought some beer and headed back to Eric's house, where they put on music, lit candles, and had sex. At around 12:30, Tammy got dressed and left to walk back to her Aunt Vicky's. She never made it home. The next day, Friday, September 18th, 1992, Vicky would notice freshly folded clothing still resting on Tammy's bed. However, since Tammy was an adult and was known to stay at other people's homes, she wouldn't think much about it. In fact, It wouldn't be until Saturday, September 19th, when Tammy failed to show up to work at Mom's picnic place to waitress at 11 a.m., that the alarm would sound. After receiving a call from where she worked, Vicki would call Eric's house to see if she was there. She wasn't, and Eric seemed shocked that she hadn't made it home early Friday morning. Vicki would make a number of calls to Tammy's friends, and Eric would call Tammy's friend Dee Dee.
I think I was just so surprised that he called me at my home, called me at home and in the morning. He's not a person. So I was probably, it's kind of one of those things where after you call, they're like, what the hell just happened? I think I was just kind of in shock that he was calling me anyways. We were broken up and they were together. They were on and off together for a little while by this time. So I think I was just kind of probably, and it was pretty early in the morning too. I was like, what the heck? And then when I started, I was kind of just in shock by it. Like, what's going on? Like, should I be freaking out about this or what? I think it was more of a flag that he called me than maybe her just to be missing. Not missing, but not show up. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, sure. Yep.
It was more, he's never called me before if he stood her up doing something else before, which I've never heard her just not showing up or standing people up. That's really not like her.
And here's Tammy's
I had
friend
something
Marjo
going on,
again.
so I don't think I found out that Travis hadn't heard from her until Saturday when I stopped in Yankton, and Travis said to me, he goes, have you heard anything from Tammy? And I said, no. And I was like, do you have it? And he was like, no. And he goes, I'm worried. And I was just like, yeah, because it was really not like her to not at least tell Travis where she was at or what she was doing, because they were pretty close. They had gone to UNL together. So I was just really concerned. So Travis and I, when he got off work, went looking for her and everything, and then did the same thing on Sunday. And we were concerned because we were going around asking everyone if they'd seen her, and no one had. And we pretty much figured out that she went to the party with Stukel. So we decided to walk the route that she probably would have taken had she left his house. And we were looking, and it sounds dumb now, but we were looking for like cigarette butts and stuff with her lipstick on it. Just anything that would have been like, okay, she walked from his house.
Shocked and worried, they would gather with other friends and start combing Yankton and the surrounding areas looking for Tammy. At around 7:15 p.m., Vicki would formally file a missing persons report with the Yankton Police Department. One friend, Katie, would see Eric's car that evening at the Cork and Bottle gas station and liquor store at around 9 p.m., and she stopped to ask him if he knew where she was. His answer was short and to the point, and alarming. Dee Dee happened to be riding with Katie that night.
I don't remember who else was with us, if it was just Katie and I or not. I don't know if there's anybody with us. And we just, were driving around, and we saw Eric at Cork and Bottle, and I'm like, where have you been? Where have you been looking? What have you been doing? He didn't say anything, and I'm like, and I remember getting in an argument with him. I was outside yelling at him. I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. You're not even helping us look. What the heck happened? What are you, and he's like, and they go, do you have any idea where she is? And then that's when he said she's probably laying dead in the ditch somewhere.
6 hours later, Eric would walk into his parents' Frying Pan restaurant at around 3 a.m., where he'd take a seat in the far corner booth at the back of the restaurant. A waiter named Josh would bring him a menu, and Eric would order a coffee and a Rosie's breakfast with bacon. Josh knew Eric somewhat because Eric had worked at the restaurant, having been fired a couple weeks before for mouthing off to his mother. Since it was late and quiet in the restaurant, Josh went back to Eric's table to try and start a conversation. Josh would later testify that Eric seemed upset and looked like he hadn't slept in a while. Eric was just looking down and stirring his coffee when Josh asked him, "Are you okay?" Eric replied, "I think I killed a girl. or in other reports it's stated as, "I think I might have killed a girl." Shaken by his response, Josh would go into the kitchen and talk with Jason, Eric's best friend, and tell him what he said. Jason leaves the kitchen and goes out to talk with Eric and returns to tell Josh that Eric was just drunk. During his testimony, Josh would point out that he didn't know Tammy at all and thus was completely unaware of the significance of this statement at the time. Eric would later pay and go home. The next morning, Tammy's friends Travis and Marjo would continue their search for Tammy. They decided to stop by Eric's house on Douglas Street to talk to him and see if he knew anything. They knocked on the door. Shortly after, Eric would dash past the door and down the stairs into the basement. A family member would open the door and let them in, where they headed downstairs to Eric's room.
Sunday that we went over to his house just to ask him where she was or if he had any idea where she was. And it was just really, it was bizarre at first, it was almost like he wasn't going to come to the door. And then Travis was just like, let's just walk in. And like I'm trying to recall, I mean,
Sure.
and we walked in and he was just sitting there, and it was just very bizarre because we were sitting there, Travis and I, we were very concerned that she was missing, and he was nonchalant about it. And that's when he was just like, he brought up the Mind's Eye book, and I'm just like, what are you talking about? And there was a shrine. I remember there was a shrine, and then their song was playing. And I didn't know that at the time until Travis and I left. And Travis was like, did you hear that song? And I was just like, what? And he goes, that was their song. And that's their song or something like that. And I was like, well, that's so bizarre. I was like, he's not even concerned that she's missing. No one's heard from her. And we really didn't think anything. You don't really think anything at the time. You just kind of like, this is odd behavior, but Eric Stukel was an odd person.
Eric's demeanor would seem like he knew more than he was letting on. And this was something I decided to ask his best friend Jason about.
I think he figured she was gone, before she was found, I think, because somebody would have heard from her. And he was kind of trying to come to that realization before she was found that, something happened, I think he put that together, in his mind. He was preparing himself for it, somebody to find her, just to, I don't know, deal with, shit. Everybody deals with death in a certain way, but, this one was, just something else entirely. Well, and then if you knew her too, and then that's the real hard part, to think that, me or my friends, fucking ended that. That's a tough part, That's really hard to deal with. Makes me want to fucking strangle people. That think that, or try to convince them otherwise, and then beat my head against the fucking wall at the same time, It's like, shit. It doesn't matter what's out there. You're not going to change your mind or anything. So I finally realized that. No, I still haven't realized that. I still, that's why I'm talking to you.
On Tuesday, September 22nd, 1992, Jason Foss had been told about the dead in the ditch comment, and he asked Eric what he thought happened to her, and Eric stated, "For all I know, she could be dead in that ditch." Within a day or two, the waiter from the restaurant, Josh, would see a newspaper article regarding Tammy's disappearance, and he would realize that Tammy was Eric's girlfriend. After Tammy was found, he would make a comment to a friend, Roxanne, who would call law enforcement and report what she had heard. The next day, law enforcement would meet with Josh, and he'd tell them what Eric said. After 6 days, Tammy is found by a golfer looking for golf balls. An autopsy is performed in Sioux Falls, but no answers are found. A second autopsy in Sioux City reveals strange injuries, and law enforcement feels they have a homicide on their hands, and they begin to zero in on Tammy's boyfriend, Eric Stukel. Although Tammy's case has grown cold, that doesn't mean that it's closed. The FBI and Yankton Police Department continue to seek information in the death of Tammy Haas. If you have information, you have options. Call the FBI's Sioux Falls Resident Agency at 605-334-6881, the Yankton Police Department at 605-668-5210, submit a tip at tips.fbi.gov, or lastly, send us a message. Someone knows what happened to Tammy, and maybe you know how to help solve the mystery. On the next episode of Footsteps in the Dark, Season 1, Tammy Haas.
We were down at the Walnut Tavern a few days before I found her. Mm-hmm. And he mentioned, we're sitting at the bar having a beer, and he mentioned that was it his niece or his cousin, I can't remember which, it's Brad Haas, but was missing. That day I decided to go hunt golf balls. You know, it's something I've done in the past, but it was, instead of going and having a few drinks with the guys, I decided I was going to go hunt golf balls. And at that time I belonged to Crossland Golf Course. And but I went down there and I started finding golf balls and just kept going along, and I seen a girl, looked like a girl. Oh, Jesus, it's been a long time. Anyways, I'm going up the hill, and I flagged the first car down, and it's a young high school girl.
Well, it was just, I seen him, standing alongside the road. I pulled over, and the words out of his mouth is, he said, "I think I just found the girl's body that's been missing from Yankton." And I was like, what? That's not what you're expecting. You're expecting, like, hey, my car broke down, something like that. And,
I drove into the office, and when I got in there, I said to one of my coworkers, "Hey, what the hell is the city got units out at the lake for?" And Dixie Bartlick was the officer I was working with that day, and excuse me. And Dixie said, they found that Haas girl, and I said, "Found her? Where?" "Well, in the ravine near the golf course in Nebraska." It's like, holy shit. Okay.
I know that there was a rumor going around, like, the night before that they had found a body. And then I had also heard the rumor the next morning, because I remember on campus, since USC is so close to Yankton, there was a lot of, obviously, Yankton people that went to USC. And I remember them saying, "Hey, I heard they found a body." And I was just like, it doesn't mean it's Tammy, and we just have to hold on hope that it's Tammy, or that it's not Tammy, because nothing had been confirmed by that, at least to me. And then by the time I was walking across campus, a couple of sorority sisters said to me, "Your parents are at the sorority house," and then I knew for sure that was her body.
All of you have been trying to say that for 30 years.
Yeah.
This podcast was written and produced by me, your host, Chad Zimmerman. The song featured in the trailer, Tammy's Ghost, was written and features John Salap on vocals, guitar, and bass, Matt Gedney on guitar, Adam Jones on drums, and Laura Egan and Carl Graber on horns.